Good evening and welcome once again to Ideas at Work with Marty Heiser. That's right, Marty Heiser. Remember that name. I'm so glad you joined us again because you know what? There's a hurricane going on outside. There's no NFL football on TV. So why not hunker down right here with Ideas at Work and Beyond? We have an incredible show today. The amount of power that's represented in this studio audience, or this studio tonight, is just unbelievable. You may have heard of the Tea Party. Well, we've got the man. He won't admit it. But we got the man who is very instrumental in the Tea Party movement here in Connecticut. He won't admit it because, you know, the Tea Party, there's no one really in charge. We're all Indians. There's no chiefs. But meanwhile, they're winning election after election after election, and they're driving Al Robinson and my liberal Democrat friends right around the bend. They're driving them to distraction. They don't know what to make of all this. Well, we've got the guy here, a guy by the name of Bob McGuffey. While you're waiting, go ahead, Google that guy. You'll see him on the steps of the Capitol, both in Hartford and Washington, D.C., giving some pretty compelling speeches. But before we get to Bob, we're delighted to have with us this evening Senator Tony Boucher. That's right, right here in our studio, Senator Tony Boucher. But before we get to her, probably the only person that can out-talk me is Tony Boucher. Maybe there's others, I don't know. But I just want to share with you, my beloved audience, an experience I had this afternoon because Linda McMahon had a news conference at a small, struggling business in East Hartford to accept the endorsement of the National Independent Businessmen Associations. A wonderful event. And I went there. I had a tie on. I had a cameraman, David Strait. Now,
hey, I'm not doing that again, Marty, unless I have a bigger camera. I'm not going with the smallest camera again.
There's some issues here. You might want to have the children leave the room because we're going to talk about insecurities. And let's just say that there were some big cameras there, but we had a small camera. Be that as it may, we were members of the media. We had a right to be there. And I asked the candidate a question. The question was as follows. Do you think your opponent had any hand in Connecticut being voted the most business-unfriendly state in the Union? You would have thought someone released a skunk at the garden party. You should have seen it. If looks could kill. Everyone looked over because there were all these, you know, reporters there. And they said, man, who invited this? Who is this guy? You know, he's not following the narrative. Here's the narrative. Linda McMahon doesn't know what she's talking about. Linda McMahon doesn't want to raise the minimum wage. Linda McMahon is out of touch and she runs an enterprise that doesn't pay minimum wage. Linda McMahon doesn't understand the plight of the little guy. That's the narrative. I wasn't following the narrative. I was asking a question about the opponent. Well, we have some footage of that. Our crack technical team, as we speak, is putting together that footage, and you'll see the press as they work. Now, the press has notified me that I should come to a Blumenthal press conference because they say that they're equally aggressive with Attorney General Blumenthal as he runs for United States Senate, and that may be. So I have to admit, I work for a living, so I don't go to these press conferences all the time, but at first blush, Marty Q. Citizen walking in, that was the impression I got. I got no love from my fellow members of the news. As a matter of fact, I was not following the narrative. Okay, we'll have footage of that. By the way, if we can just put up, Al, the front cover of The Advocate. It could be, these front pages, you got to understand, the liberal Democrats, especially here in Connecticut, are used to being in charge. They're used to having their man be ahead in the polls. They're used to, you know, just sort of running things. And when they see headlines like they have here, do you have that headline? It'll be a lovely picture of Linda McMahon and something about how she's doing very well. And then the following picture will be a graph. And the graph looks something like this. Blumenthal going down. Linda McMahon going up as we're headed towards November 2nd. There we go, closing the gap. Hold on, my wife's calling, pick up milk. Okay, I will, I got it. Honey, I'm on TV. All right, closing the gap, there you have it. And then can we get the next one? The next one is the graph. I'm sorry, Al, I don't mean to work. The next one is a graph. When the graph shows Linda McMahon's approval rating and people, likely voters, and, you know, Quinnipiac has something to do with it. The fact are, there we go. It started out very wide. Blumenthal would be there in blue. McMahon is coming up, and it's almost a dead heat at this point. So anyways, that's what Marty did today, and we'll have some more footage of that, and you can decide. Al Robinson is quite convinced that all these crack reporters don't like me, and I don't know. I've made it 48 years without being friends with them. I think I'll be just fine. That being said,
Marty, what a segue into exactly what I came here to talk to you about.
Tony, what's on your mind?
Let
By
me
the way,
tell you.
State Senator Tony Boucher.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is the real world and giving politicians a dose of the real world.
Ouch.
Because oftentimes they don't live in the real world. A lot of folks don't realize that in Connecticut we have a citizen legislature.
Yes.
What does that mean? That means it's part-time. And many of us work in the real world. I work in the real world.
So you're out plowing your field, you say, hush, leave the plow, and go off to the Capitol and make good legislation for your fellow citizens. Is that it?
Or prevent bad legislation,
Okay.
more than likely. When you're in the minority, as we are, 2/3 of the legislature, in fact we have a one-party system, has really run this state for quite a number of years, and particularly in the last 2 to 4 years, it's gotten decidedly more business unfriendly, as you've just pointed out. And in the real world where I live, most of the day, there is no job security. There are job losses. There are not platinum-plated benefits for life.
Yeah.
Things get cut. Salaries get cut. Business owners, small business owners, don't take pay for 5 to 6 months so that they can keep people employed. And I have been visiting some of our small businesses. Let me tell you, things are not great there. You know, I have one florist that's been in business for 40 years. She's only months away from possibly closing her doors permanently.
Wow.
We have many businesses that are down 50%, not 20%, but 50% from previous years. So people are hurting out there, and they've had to really cut back. And what has not happened up in Hartford is they have not cut back at all. And we have some running around saying, well, you know, they've cut too much, tax hikes are inevitable. That's just the kind of thinking that's led us to the position that we are in today. So something really has to be done. We have to change the atmosphere, the culture. We have to bring balance. That 2/3 majority, one-party rule has got to change. We have to be able to have voices be heard, particularly the voices of the public. And what I am finding when I'm there is that they're not listening to the people. They're not listening to the people that live in the real world as I do. And so I think that message needs to come, and come strongly, on November the 2nd.
We're joined also by David Straight, among other things, a financial analyst, man about town, and cameraman with a rather small camera. But anyway,
do you do?
What
Well,
are your thoughts?
let me just say, Tony, give me a taste of a flavor for how the budget process goes. So Jody Rell proposes a budget, hands it to
That's
the
right.
state legislature.
That's right.
And how many times since Jody's been in office has the state legislator come back and said, no, you're spending way too much, we've got to cut? Have they ever said that?
Well, let me tell you something, okay? Jody Rell can propose a budget, but it's the legislature that decides it. They approve it. She has no power to approve a budget that she submits. And quite frankly, there have been 5, 6, 7, 8 different opportunities to balance a budget, to propose a different budget, to mitigate the budget deficit that we've had, and all of those very important proposals that did not include tax increases, by the way, or the doubling of fees that were passed in there, or is your special interest is energy prices. There was a tax put on your energy bill, get this, a tax for the next 8 years that they borrowed against that particular revenue stream just to solve the problems for today. And that's the kind of borrowing and the stalling of making the really difficult decisions that the people expect from their elected leaders to make. So quite frankly, I believe that the governor has worked under overwhelming odds for the last couple of years and has had a very difficult time going of it. I think the public sees that. I think they've been very supportive of her. She still has unbelievable 60%, near 60% approval rating because they understand the constraints that she's been functioning under.
So the party that's been in control for how many of the 30 of the last 35 years, or whatever
absolutely.
it's been?
Yep.
So have they ever come back to her and said, you're spending too much, we need to cut, we think your budget proposals are outrageous, we need to make them much less? Have they ever done that?
No, not in the time that I have been there, quite frankly. There have been a few proposals that we get some cooperation. Here's a good example of one particularly. You know how business unfriendly we are in Connecticut?
Yes.
There are reasons for that, because the policies we've enacted have really burdened businesses, whether they double their fees or they put a $250 business entity tax just for existing.
Just for existing.
That's in addition, of course, to the corporate taxes that they pay. That's in addition to 80% of small businesses carry the state, and 80% of those businesses put their revenue stream through their own personal income taxes because they're LLCs or LPs, and as such, they're taxed on that business by the personal property tax. They're taxed by the sales tax. They're taxed by their property tax. They're taxed by the equipment tax that they have on there. They're taxed in so many different ways.
Well, it reminds me of that movie that Robin Williams played in Popeye. When he pulls up on shore, when the boat comes in and it's sinking, he walks up on shore, and every step he takes, there's a tax man following him and says, there's a boat tax, there's a dock tax, there's a fee here, there's a fee there. That's exactly what seems to be happening in Connecticut. It's just a big game on how we can tax you more.
Well, it's not, and it's just not those taxes. There's other things to consider as well. It's the kind of legislation that routinely gets proposed. I was talking about the $250 business entity tax. Much was made of that. So my friends on the other side said, well, you know what? Maybe we'll take it away this year. You know how they expected to take that away? Not by reducing costs. What they did was put a new tax, another tax, to pay for that reduction of the $250 business tax on business itself. So it really doesn't make sense. We really have to get serious about this. And businesses tell me that if they really want to grow here, they need a little bit of predictability. They need to have a sense that really that the General Assembly wants them to be here and is not so punitive. You know, it's been so difficult because as businesses have come back, really the only group that's been protected. I've had opponents say to me, well, people have to share the pain. Quite frankly, the people have been sharing the pain. They are the ones that have. But the very large employer in the state, 53,000 employees worth, the state government, has not shared much in the pain at all. That's my concern. And we're not talking about wholesaling laying people off. We're just asking them maybe for a year or two, they could take a pay freeze. Certainly in our business we have for at least 3 years, we had a 10% cut across the board. This is a small business that I work in, 200 people or less. GE cut 10% across the board. I visited families within my district just a couple of weeks ago where GE had laid off one of the people in that household because they had a 10% layoff across not just this nation, but across their business sector throughout the globe. So there's a lot of cutting back that's going on, and none of that is happening there. We still have job protection. We still have very expensive benefits, and we have a pension plan that is slated to possibly go broke by 2020. We are one of the top 7 states that are most at risk for going bankrupt in our pension plan.
Is it time to renegotiate those pensions?
It certainly is, and it can be done. People will say, well, it's a contract. You can certainly renegotiate. And by the way, you know those contracts are supposed to be approved by the House and Senate. Do they get approved? No. They don't even vote on it because they don't want their fingerprints on it.
We're joined also by Al Robinson. Al Robinson is the founder and author of Hat City Blog. And Al, what are your thoughts?
Real quick, next year, you know, you're going to be facing a pretty big budget situation.
Absolutely.
I think $3.5 billion, if I'm correct.
That's correct.
You're very well known in terms of education. I think you've got some props from ConCan. And you're very well known in terms of transportation. How do you address the concerns in regards to transportation needs in your district as well as education while handling a $3.5 billion deficit?
Well, that's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. I have been one of the leaders in the state as an advocate for education reform, and actually in my work and time on the Transportation Committee these last 2 years since I've become a leader for the first time, I was actually able to get serious things done, whether it was widening the roadway between Danbury and Norwalk, or it was actually putting $30 million of improvements in the signaling system that no one has been able to do for the last 20 years. So we've gotten some really serious things done, and some small things that didn't cost any money, and that is to take away the restraints of the DOT from all the land they own in between so that we can actually propose and move forward on a greenway project creating a trail for bicycles and pedestrians. So we really got a lot of things done. Now, how do you continue to provide education funding, transportation funding? Well, one of the first precepts I have is that you do not do any harm to local municipalities, both in their education funding and their road programs. Because if you do, that just goes back on the taxpayer in the way of property taxes, particularly in the district that I have where the state gives very little, really, in the way of support in that regard. So how do we do that? Oh my gosh, the list is so long I can't even begin to tell you.
Give us the top two.
But let me, okay, well, the top two is, again, taking the biggest cost driver that we have, and that's the state of Connecticut's salary structure and pension plans and benefit plans. We have to go there because the cost savings there could be in the billions of dollars. Certainly we tweaked it just slightly in the last 2 years, just slightly, and $400 million was saved. Now, think about this. Think if everybody's
what percentage was cut to get that 400?
Oh, there was,
Was it less than 1%, 2%?
It was
Very small.
Very small. Okay. However, okay, the pension plan that most state employees have, they contribute very little, if anything at all. That's called a defined benefits plan. Most people in the real world, in the world that I live in where I work, I have a 401k plan. I contribute to that every 2 weeks out of my own personal pay. So I have to take less take-home pay, and I put a portion of that in my 401k. We need to convert state employees to the same plan because their wages now have risen so high, they're really 30% higher than the private sector. Their benefits are nearly 70% greater, if not more. Here's a good example where we can save money. One of my aides, who used to work in Washington, D.C., and was on a government plan from the federal government, he was paying for a drug once a month that he needed for a chronic disease, and it was $40 copay for him. So he paid $40 out of pocket, and the federal government and your taxes paid for the rest. When he came to Connecticut, that very same drug, he only paid $8 a month for that. So $32 more was being subsidized by the taxpayer. There are many more examples of that. We have so many other places where we can go.
Yeah,
and nuances.
Just maybe one or two specific programs you look into that could drastically deal with it. Because again, we're talking about $3.5 billion.
Oh, absolutely.
And we had Tom Foley here a couple of weeks ago who brought up a topic, and he brought it down from, I think he shaves up about 1.2 to 1.5, which still leaves you about $2 billion. There's going to be some severe cuts.
Well, you do realize there's 53,000 employees, 53,000 employees, the largest employer in the state of Connecticut, for 3.4 million people. That's a lot. If you compare it to, say, a state like Indiana that has 5 million people, they only have 33,000 employees. A lot of our services can be provided very cost effectively by the nonprofit sector. Case in point. We have Ability Beyond Disability in our area. In the Norwalk area that serves the disabled, it's the STAR program. They provide training and placement for the disabled in businesses and other professions and so forth. They do it at half the cost and half the salary and benefits than the government sector does in the state. Here's another example, Yukon Health Center. They are in the hole, we can save $22 million right off the bat. $22 million in the hole every year that the state has to subsidize and your tax dollars have to subsidize. Why is that? When we tried to merge them with a nonprofit hospital, they said that the salary and benefits were too high. They would go out of business. Most teaching hospitals throughout the country are nonprofits. They have spun off as nonprofits, so they're not state employees. All of those folks are state employees. We have had a 10% increase in someone's salary in the chancellor's office for the state university system, not UConn, but the state university system that oversees the various southerns and centrals and so on. This is a whole nother level of administration beyond the local school itself that has their own president, their own board of trustees, and so on. They had one salary that was so outrageous that it went up in this worst time ever in the last year, that went up from, I was told, $180,000 a year to over $200,000 a year. This doesn't have to happen.
So not to steal your thunder here, but bottom line, you're saying that there's some fat in the state government.
There is. There are
inefficiencies for years.
Inefficiencies and duplications as well.
I understand, and all this stuff is very compelling, and I agree with you. My question is, I want to look at this from 30,000 feet. Can we really turn this thing around in Hartford?
We can.
Can it really happen?
It can happen.
I mean, because
We
right
did it
now,
before.
I mean, I would say the energy is there, the focus is there. People feel like their businesses are being taxed out of the state. We haven't had positive job growth in Connecticut for 2 decades. 2 decades this has been going on.
Right.
Now, I bring this up to other folks. I bring it up to other people that have come on this show, and they say, "No, wait a minute. You've had a Republican governor, and the governor is the one who sets the bonds or something like that. They're the ones that do the investing, and so all this."
The Treasurer's Office does that. That's every office beyond the governor has been democratically controlled for a very, very long time. And I have to tell you, some will say, like you were mentioning, that tax hikes are inevitable because the situation is so great. Where are we going to go? We've doubled every fee you can think of. And in addition to that, we took our state income tax, and we made it more progressive, 6.5 for those making $500,000 or more. And remember, what did I just say? That 80% of our small businesses run their entire business through their income tax.
Yeah.
That throws them into that category.
Yeah.
So they may only take home $70,000 or $80,000 a year to raise a family. Okay, so here you go there. And further, I've just got to get this in.
Okay.
Further, I've got to get this in. This is important. The state of Rhode Island had a much higher progressive income tax too. Do you know what they did this last year? They saw Connecticut raise theirs. They took theirs down to 5.9, so it could be under Connecticut. Do you think the state of Maine did the very same thing? You know what they found? They found by putting a much higher 8% progressive tax, they lost the jobs that went with that income. And so they are backtracking. As Connecticut's moving in that direction, they are backtracking.
There's this theory that, that you're somehow going to lift up the wage earner by trying to tax to death the wage payer. I mean, it's crazy
the job
kind of
creator.
That, what we're going to do? We're going to really, I think President Obama called them fat cats. We're going to really tax those fat cats, those guys running a business, those guys meeting a payroll. We need jobs, we need jobs. Let's tax those guys, tax those guys. Hey, where do you think the jobs are going to come from? I mean, at this thing with Linda McMahon this morning, there's this hardworking guy. He went to college at UConn. He started a little office cleaning business 20 years ago. He built it up. He's got a nice little business going there. We're meeting in his little warehouse. He has a potential U.S. senator there and TV cameras, and there's still holes in the ceiling because he hasn't afford to fix the ceiling.
Right.
He's doing the best he can. I can tell walking in a business if it's being run lean or if it's some sort of fat cat. This is not a fat cat. And all he said is to the government, just leave us alone.
Well,
just leave us alone.
And labor.
Don't keep coming back to us like we're some sort of ATM machine, taxing and taxing and taxing, and then said, "Gosh, we have this high unemployment. Isn't it terrible?" Where do you think the jobs are going to come from? You can only have so many government jobs. You can only have so many borrowing from China to pay off all the states, to pay for all these state workers. It's not sustainable. That's the problem with socialism. Eventually, you run out of people that actually work for a living and produce something.
One of the interactions I've had on the Finance Committee up in the legislature was when I heard some testimony from some organizations that were just going on and on about how profits are bad and the people that make profit are somehow bad. And I finally had enough. I had to remind them, and I said, profits equal jobs. If you're in a private business and you're not in the government sector, you can't exist unless you can at least make a profit. You can't work in the black or you go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And cities have done that, by the way, the city of Waterbury. Yeah. We don't want the state of Connecticut to move in that same direction. That there is a free enterprise system that makes things work. Other places in the world are coming around to that same thinking. Even Europe is changing. And look at our nearest neighbor, Cuba, whose great experiment.
How's that working out?
Exactly. They are now laying off 500,000 state employees. You know why? Because last year they decided to privatize the barber industry, and it worked so well that they decided they're going to, because they are going belly up. That great experiment has not worked.
Cuba is telling all their state workers, go get a job, get a real job. I mean, Fidel's coming around. I don't know why the Democrats in Connecticut don't come around. Caller, are you there? You have a question for State Senator Tony Boucher.
It's interesting.
Oh, if he doesn't, I will.
Okay.
First, I want to say I'm glad to see you on again tonight. I'm an avid fan of yours. And one thing I have to say before I speak to Tony, last week when I asked Alice a question running for State Senate about energy bill and about health care, a typical politician, she sidestepped my questions on each one. But, you know, Tony Boucher, I respect her. She sounds like a very intelligent woman, and she's for the people. Tony, my question to you, with the way the economy is in Connecticut, and you're talking about trying to lower the income tax to stay compatible for the business to stay here and grow, how long do you think it would take to get it through? Do you think with the incoming governor, whoever, Democrat or Republican, you'd have a chance of doing that?
Excellent question. Thanks so much. That was my uncle. He actually thinks very highly of me. But what about that? How long is it going to take? I mean, we're about to have a guy on who's involved with the Tea Party movement. They throw these guys out of office. Republican, Democrat, they don't care. I love the political cartoon where the Tea Party guy is throwing this elephant overboard.
Absolutely.
And I'm telling you, people have had it. They want results. What are you going to do?
Well,
assuming you win your election.
He asks an excellent question. The beauty of the Connecticut system is not only is there a citizen legislature that at least allows people that work in the real world to run every 2 years. Everyone is on a 2-year schedule. Right. So in other words, if things aren't happening for them, every 2 years they get a chance to vote people out or vote people in. And I would say 2 years is a good barometer. We've had 2 years of a national administration, and you have had a couple of years. I think 2 years is a good barometer. We did it once before. When we had a Republican governor in the early 90s, after the Weichert administration, the person that said, I will not be intimidated by the will of the people, which, by the way, the will of the people is what brings you here. Well, guess what? We had a Republican governor, and we had a Republican Senate and a Democratic House. It was more balanced. And in those 2 years, we had such a turnaround. Do you know that we reduced unemployment and workers' comp costs for private business? We were the highest in the country at the time. We reduced them by 30%. It made a huge difference in the overhead costs of businesses. It can be done with the right person and policies, and everyone pulling together, not just Republicans, but Democrats and Republicans together, all rooting for the same thing, and that is the revival of Connecticut and the revival of jobs, and to bring back young people. The 18 to 34-year-olds, they're not here because the jobs are not here, the opportunities are not here, the high structural cost of everything. And by God, you know, we don't need to increase the minimum wage every single year I've been there. They wanted to make it higher than the national.
Well, the problem is not the minimum wage in Connecticut. The problem is regulation and taxes. You get those straightened out, and the wages take care of themselves.
Well, let me jump in real quick. Just one quick question before we go to a break here. Again, you're a big fan of education, and I'm a one of my big concerns is education, because on a municipal level, most budgets go towards education. Right. We have the biggest achievement gap in the country.
It's awful.
How do you address education? Some people were quietly saying that maybe we're putting too much money into education. We're dumping all this money in here, but we have this achievement gap. How do you deal with education? And do you think we should take a serious look at maybe bringing some cuts, cutting teachers, cutting administrators? Where do you feel, in terms of the achievement gap, are the problems, and how do we solve it?
The achievement gap is, some people would say it's very complex, but let's not talk about money just for a second. Let's talk about schools that are actually doing something well right now. In New Haven, we have a charter school that is in the worst part of town, the most disadvantaged children with the most barriers. They've had 100% graduation rate, and they've had 100% going on to either a community college or some other school. It has been extraordinary. What does it take? Unbelievable leadership, fantastic teachers, a very rigorous curriculum. You know, putting parents in the mix, requiring their participation. Notice, all of these things so far have not cost any money. But what they do mean is a change of policy allowing leadership to be able to work on improving a teacher performance, and if after a great deal of work there's no improvement, allowing them to change the teacher in that classroom. A school, if they're on a watch list, then people should work towards improving it. And if they can't do that in 2 years, then it needs to be shut down and reconfigured completely. There needs to be more flexibility and freedom in the system, because it's unconscionable that we allow so many failing schools to persist while those students are being lost. As bright and as gifted as any student in any wealthy community that I know of, that are there. I know that they're there. They're the great scientists, business people, artists, and so on. They exist there. And I can tell you that from personal experience myself and my brother, who both of us were very poor. And, you know, it takes a lot of guts to do that and a change of attitude, particularly, and I work very closely with the Black and Latino caucus in the legislature on these issues. They want the freedom to be able to, and the power to be able to reconfigure their school or take a bad teacher out and bring a good one in.
Okay.
We need to get busy and start really making those tough decisions.
Okay.
Okay. Unbelievable. And all, ladies and gentlemen, on only one breath. That's incredible. Our guest has been Tony Boucher, state senator. She should not be trifled with like this. And by the way, all of you joining us on Comcast, no, Cablevision. Cablevision. Now, it's Greenwich, New Canaan, all those up, Wilton, they'll all see you.
October 13th.
October 13th. So we're going to re-air this. She is your state senator, Tony Boucher, the 26th district. The election day is November 2nd. And I want to thank you very much for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
I appreciate it very much.
It's always fun
and
enjoyable.
I love having
you back on?
And
With Hartwell,
we definitely want
head
you.
to head?
We are talking about that.
Can we make it happen?
I'm not sure. I'm not
Can we
sure.
make it happen right here? Can we make a commitment right now?
Let me tell you right now. No, I had to say something about this, in fact.
Can we have a commitment?
Come on, pistols at dawn. What do you say? Come on, we'll televise
I
it.
will tell you, we're already doing that. I'm the only state senate race that we're having that has 3 debates. Every other one has 1. So we are more than committed. We are completely booked right to the very bitter end. And we're going
What Al's referring to is we had a debate, I think, 2 years ago, and we were this far away from turning right into Jerry Springer right here on this show because they almost went to blows. And the tail of the tape is the other guy's a little bit bigger than Tony. It's hard to envision, but true. But I would have put my money on Tony.
I bet on Tony.
But
Well, and you did, and you won the bet.
And we won the bet.
You won the bet.
We won the bet.
So here we are,
Okay.
fighting for the last 2 years.
We've got to take a quick break here because we have an incredibly powerful guy, although he won't admit to it. He's really in charge of the Tea Party, although he won't admit to it. But he's going to be on next, and we're going to ask him, what's up with the Tea Party? Are these guys really for real, or what are they all about? So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Sorry.
Hi, welcome to Community Access, Channel 23. Let's go on inside and see what's going on.
Dream big.
Hey, this is Big T here telling you to dream big.
Hey, at Channel 23, you can dream big and direct your own show.
Dream big.
We want you to all dream big.
We
Dream big.
Cable Access, Channel 23, dream big.
Call us today at 203-792-1265 and find out how you can dream big at Channel 23.
I mean, covering the whole interview with Linda is too long. Maybe just
Welcome back to Ideas at Work and Beyond with Marty Heiser. Marty Heiser. It might someday be called the Marty Heiser Show, but for now it's Ideas at Work and Beyond. And we are joined by a guy that I am very inspired by, Bob McGuffey. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having
me.
me.
The organization that you started is Right Principle.
Correct.
I just want to go through some of your tidbits. You have an MBA in finance from New York University, so you're not like a dumb guy.
No.
You're very smart. You have a BA in economics from Queens College.
Correct.
So you've got kind of that rough New York edge. Is that okay to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
indeed.
You don't suffer fools.
No.
You're tired of being pushed around by the government.
Indeed.
And you're doing something about it. And I've seen footage of you speaking on not just the state capitol steps, but our nation's capitol steps.
Yep.
And frankly, I don't mind saying that I found those speeches very inspirational.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right,
we
well-
try to get them going.
Now, I have a couple quick questions. You talk about taking over not just the government. You're not some Republican hack coming in here just spouting the party line. But if Republicans don't toe the line, like we saw in Delaware, you're willing to put your money behind a candidate that is in favor of limited government, is in favor of capitalism over communism, is in favor of remembering in November what took place with Obamacare a year ago. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, that's what the movement is all about, Marty. It's really about limited government, individual freedom, fiscal restraint, and capitalism and a free market economy where people can make choices for everything in their lives. That's what the country was founded on, and that's what the Republican Party, for the last 100 years at least, those are the principles that are supposed to be driving and animating that party. But what we see very rarely, do those principles really come to the forefront and be acted upon? And what we see all too often is Republicans in name only, the rhinos, engaging with the Democrats, and you get just more big government. And we're just, we're trying to get the Republican Party back on its foundations. And if it, what you've seen in the primaries is a conservative insurgency within the Republican Party to get good candidates up there that actually are going to walk the talk and get rid of some of those rhinos. So you saw it in Utah with Bennett, in Florida, Christ was taken out, Delaware, Castle was taken out, New York,
yeah, I was just going through like the scorecard. For those of you scoring at home, Scott Brown, that was a good night.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, Kentucky. Did you have a hand in Kentucky?
Rand Paul. Oh, sure. The Tea Party did most.
Alaska.
Definitely. Yep.
Now, what fascinates me about Alaska is Miller beats the incumbent. Now, was the incumbent a Republican?
Absolutely.
Okay, but Republican, don't you just fall in line and follow like a good lapdog and do what the
we're
party
principle
tells you?
focused. We're focused on principles.
Okay, so then Murkowski decides she's going to throw her hat in the ring, and your guy, the Tea Party, it turns out, are taking as many votes away from Democrats as they are from Republicans. Doesn't that give to the lie that you're supposedly some ultra right-wing part of the Republican Party?
Oh,
when you're taking votes away from the Democrats as much as you are taking away from the Republicans.
Yeah, yes, we are. That whole lie, that's a myth put out by the liberal media and the liberal politicians. The last thing they want the Republican Party to be is a genuine party of limited government and individual freedom, because they know that there's more people in the country that subscribe to those views than the other side. And so they put up the myth of the big tent and the moderation and all the rest of it. It's not true. The big myth is if there's 30% registered Democrats in the country, 30% registered Republicans, and the 40% that are left, they immediately go to the conclusion that those are moderates. They're not moderates. They're independent and unaffiliated. And they're chock full of people that believe there's no difference between the two parties, and that they would vote for, they're conservatives that would vote for the Republican Party if they stood on principle. That's the myth.
Let me just put this in broad strokes, because I'm a simple man with a simple mind. In broad strokes, what we have is we have Republicans. People don't want to necessarily be identified with the Republicans. That was my dad's party. They're kind of country club, quiche eating guys. We don't want to do that. Then you got Democrats. They're the guys for the blue collar guy. They're the working man. You're a union man. You're a Democrat. Vote for them. And all of a sudden you got this huge growing independent group in the middle. And whichever way those independents break is going to be who wins the election. And guess who's smack dab right with all those independents for whatever reason? It's you guys.
The Tea Party.
Explain that to me.
With a swing vote in the country, with the old silent majority. I mean, people have had enough. They've seen enough. And after 2 years of the Democrat Congress, and then a Democrat president coming in, and the stimulus and the bailouts, and the seemingly endless stream of government programs coming at us, people came right out and said that this is enough. And they're in the streets, and they're organizing, and it's just average people. Anybody goes to a Tea Party will find their neighbor there, their uncle, they'll find their grandmother there and their grandfather there. It's America. It's the swing vote in America. It's average people, and that is why the media has disparaged them right off the bat. It's their biggest nightmare that the average people would wake up and get out and get animated.
Bob, isn't this really the battle of the billionaires, though? Because you had George Soros funding MoveOn.org, and he was pushing way to the left, promoted Obama, promoted the entire liberal agenda. You have the Koch brothers on the right with billions of dollars pouring into conservative issues and admittedly supporting the Tea Party. Isn't this the clash of the billionaires?
No,
isn't this a political debate that's being fought at a very high level, and a lot of people are just pawns in the process?
I've never heard of the Koch brothers until recently. Nobody's funding Tea Parties. We are.
FreedomWorks?
There's no money. They don't put money into it. They don't put money into the Tea Parties. They put money to candidates, but they don't put money into Tea Parties. No Tea Party gets any money from FreedomWorks at all. I went down to a meeting at FreedomWorks, and I had to pay my own way down
They
there.
didn't
And I was
sponsor the
asked to come
9/12
down.
rally in D.C.? They weren't the major contributors to the 9/12 rally last year?
They staged it. They
sponsor
paid
it
for the
and do the whole
permits.
thing?
They paid for the sound
Did they
system
do
and
a, did they
everything
do a
else.
bus
Yeah.
a bus trip throughout the entire country with Ann Coulter, who was actually in Bridgeport and in Hartford, done by FreedomWorks? I mean,
No,
they
that was
supported a
done
lot
by
of
Tea
stuff.
Party Express, and they raised but they raised their money over the internet. I mean,
All right.
from
Okay.
regular people.
But this is the thing. By the way, this is Al Robinson. He has a blog, Hat City Blog, strikes terror in the heart of any conservative, right-minded Republican, because he'll put an unfavorable photograph of you on his blog. He's done it to the mayor here in Danbury. Now, but this is
There's plenty of those out there.
I'm telling you, I've seen the picture. Mark Bowden is a handsome man, and you put a bad picture up of him, and you did it maliciously. But let's get past that. What you're saying, this is the classic line from the Democrats. It started with this concept of AstroTurf. It's not really grassroots, it's AstroTurf.
Well,
I believe Pelosi said that. And what you're implying is that somehow there's Freedom Watch, what is it called?
FreedomWorks.
FreedomWorks. Somehow FreedomWorks is funding all this stuff. And that these guys that are going down to Washington
what I'm stating here, Marty, is that you said that the whole Tea Party movement is not sponsored by anybody and not funded by anybody. And I'm saying there's some major organizations, some major groups that are help funding these things that are going on with the Tea Party movement. And FreedomWorks is a main contributor. I don't think anybody can discount that.
Hey, listen, let me tell you something. Nobody ever gets bused to an event for a Tea Party or paid to go. However,
Of course not. Nobody said that. I'm saying that
that's
these events are being sponsored.
We
The one in
stand
D.C. was sponsored by
there,
them.
and SIU shows up. They all have their pre-printed signs. They're giving lunch on the bus, and they give them $bucks to come over, and they're bussed over there from some union headquarters somewhere, and we've got them on video.
Well,
This
we
is
see a lot of stuff on the other side on video too. A lot of FreedomWorks signs and stuff. And I love the analogy of printed signs and stuff, as if people can't print signs or put up signs that come out there and just speak their mind. They're being paid to come out there and speak. But what I want to say again is, let me just go back to this. You said a lot about these the Democrat in the last 2 years spending like mad people, but I didn't hear you say a lot about the Republican administration, especially during the Bush administration, who came in with a surplus coming in from Clinton to Bush, and then within 8 years spend I think it was $455 billion per year under George Bush watch, from 2000 to especially I think 2006 to 2008. I mean, you would admit that the Bush administration under the Republicans, which was a Republican president and a Republican Congress, spent a lot of money.
Yeah, too much. You know what he did?
Well, why don't you talk about that?
He did what a lot of
he's
Republican
fixing to
presidents do.
right
He tried to buy off the left, and it's impossible. He did the Medicare drug plan, and Kennedy wasn't happy.
How would you buy off the left if you had control of the presidency, you had control of the House, and you had control of the Senate? What are you talking about control?
I carry no water for George Bush.
Buying off the
Yeah,
Democrats.
I carry no water for George Bush, but that's what he did, and it's a foolish
What do you
mistake.
mean?
And he let us down by
let me just
doing
bring it
that.
down.
No, let him finish. No, I want to have him
You know
finish.
the
I want to have him finish. I don't want to listen to you.
Give me 20 seconds.
Please.
The deficit numbers after 9/11 and the wars got started went up to about $600 billion, and he brought it down to $200 billion by 07, by the time he was leaving office. And Obama's first budget he teed up was $1.4 trillion in deficit. Plus,
Are you saying that he brought down the deficit while he was in office, George
just
Bush?
Look at the numbers.
He
Absolutely.
$400 billion
and
per
came
year
down.
every year that he was in office. He had two
went up.
wars and he
You're
gave Bush
absolutely-
tax cuts. The deficit, he came in with a surplus, and he went out with a massive, massive, massive deficit.
No, he
you
went
can't
out-
blame that on the 2 years of the
You know what the
Democrats
deficit
between
was in
06
the year
to
he
08.
left?
There's just no way.
The deficit in the year he left was $200 billion. It got as high as $600-something billion in the middle of his term, and it worked its way down.
And not true.
That's not true?
Those are the
fine.
facts.
That
Okay.
is
That's
true,
fine.
actually.
Well, you got the computer there. Look it up.
No, we'll take care of it.
Look it
We'll
up.
take
That's
care of it all.
absolutely
We'll take
true.
care of it all.
That's
we
absolutely
will get to the truth.
Okay, but Al, your point is, hey, you guys are racking Obama over the coals for spending too much money. What about your guy Bush? Did you hear what he said?
No, I'm not hearing much what he said. He said a lot about his initial comments were 2 years of the Democrats. That's what his initial comments were. So don't put words in his mouth.
That's right.
Okay.
06 to 08.
This is what we're dealing with right now.
We're dealing with him, so let's talk.
Well,
to him.
what's
No,
what's
I'm
really
talking to him, but
frightening
did you hear
is
what he said? He said he's not defending George Bush and his overspending.
what's really
not his
frightening
initial comments,
is we
he
have a
didn't say that.
$1.6 trillion deficit, and we still have all these off-balance sheet items. The wars are not being accounted for in the $1.6 trillion deficit.
No, I believe they are.
Actually,
No, they were not.
They're not.
They were not under,
I mean,
definitely not
No,
under
they
Bush.
are.
They were not
in
under
Obama's
Bush.
budget, they are.
Not under the
They're not under
1.6. They're
Bush.
not. those are off-balance sheet
So
items.
it's worse.
They're off-balance
It is.
items.
It's far worse. In other words,
And as far as the eye can see, this is unsustainable. And these people down there are not willing to take on the task at hand. And they're going to continue to push debt on the market. And now Ben Bernanke is buying debt from the Treasury. When your Federal Reserve starts buying debt from the Treasury, you are on the doorstep of bankruptcy. Just how long is that going to go on? How long is the world going to buy our debt before they back away from it? And the interest rates, in order to get people to buy it, are going to go up and up and up, and the dollar will be devalued, and they're driving us toward that. And we're trying to
Well, you
avoid
can see that in gold prices right now.
Yeah.
Gold prices at $1,300. Here's what's really interesting, not to digress, but when you look at what's going on right now globally in the economy, you have the European economy right now melting down. I don't know if you saw what happened in Ireland today. They did stress tests on the banks 4 months ago, and they said that, okay, all we need to raise is $8 billion, and all the banks in Europe are fine. Today, Ireland comes out, they need $68 billion just to secure banks in Ireland. That's 33% of their GDP. That's $4 trillion to us. That's how bad it is, and that's just one country. And in spite of that, the dollar is going down relative to the euro. The euro should be collapsing relative to the dollar. The dollar is getting killed. Bernanke is going to come out with quantitative easing in November, and gold is going to continue to climb. We have a real economic crisis here.
I know we do.
My perception of the Tea Party, for what it's worth, I think it is grassroots. I think it is driving the left berserk that they can't motivate the base like the Tea Party is doing. For example, in the primary election that we just had, the Democrats had the lowest turnout of voters, of eligible voters in history, and the Republicans had the highest turnout of eligible voters in history. That says a lot for what's going to happen on November 2nd. I think you guys are on the right track.
Well, let me jump in on that real quick. Always during the off-season election, the incumbent usually has lower numbers, and usually whoever's the party will lose numbers in Congress. But let me just talk about some of your candidates. So you have one candidate in Delaware who's still going through the process of trying to explain why her resume has been inflated in terms of what school she went to. You got another person in Angle out there in Nevada who's been caught in a series of lies, and you got an individual in Alaska who, my recollection is the incumbent now who just decided to come back into the race is leading in the polls.
Why not?
Let me finish. I gotta get it.
We might as well roll.
Can I get a topic?
I know,
Can I
but
get a question?
that's all you got is, hey, these guys.
Let me finish the question. Let me finish the question.
Go right ahead.
I mean, you going to gerrymander the whole show? You going to let some people have the opportunity to speak?
Go ahead. I'm just saying, as long as we're going on personal attacks, don't leave out the guy in New York. He's got a 10-year-old
You're not
blood
personal
child.
attacks. You attack Democrats all the time on this show.
I don't really attack them
Stop.
personally.
Let me finish, please. So we have a situation here. We have these candidates who were attracted by the further right base of the Republican Party. You don't have a lot of your moderates like your Chris Shays and people you consider moderates who were usually attracted by the independents and moderate Democrats and moderate conservatives. How do you, going into the general election, it's one thing to get a primary, to win in a primary, but how do you go forth and attract independent voters and maybe attracting Democrats onto your point of view where during the primary you have to go further to the right to get the vote?
The myth. You've bought into the myth.
Your candidates are not further to the right? The person in Alaska is not further to the right than the incumbent senator?
Yeah,
or McDonald wasn't the further to the right candidate as her opponent?
The proof will be
primary?
the proof will be in the pudding. The proof will be in the pudding. The unaffiliateds aren't necessarily moderates. That's the myth. They're loaded with conservatives that are sick and tired of the Republican Party and don't come out to vote when the rhinos get put up. You'll see. We'll all know more on November 3rd. We're going to break the myth. That's a myth. The independents and the unaffiliateds are not moderates. They're not half Democrat and half Republican. They're people out there that actually
the moderates would
know
be
the
for abortion no matter what, even in instances of rape.
I don't know.
You're
going down a rabbit hole.
Well, I'm just saying, you talk about moderates. You know, I mean,
well,
people
sir,
to the right are like
I
that.
mean, I would stand here and say I understand how I do not understand how anybody could ridicule someone who supports the right to life.
Nobody's ridiculing. I'm just asking a question.
Born child. So I don't know what the issue is there. That's a jaundiced argument against
that's O'Donnell's stance in Delaware.
Yeah, no.
That's O'Donnell's stance in Delaware. That's all.
Al, I'll jump in on that one. The government has a right and an obligation, or not a right, has an obligation to protect the innocent. There is nothing more innocent that I can think of than the unborn child. That child has done nothing wrong.
Right.
The state has an obligation to protect them.
That's not what the Supreme Court said.
Okay. My question to you, because I really like Al Robinson. Our discussions aside, these guys, and I have some
these
other,
guys, nice.
Not these guys. My other friends.
Classic, nice slip. What's next?
I have other liberal friends. That's what I mean by those ones. That are scared. They're frightened. This Tea Party movement. What is this? This is unknown. Are you in somehow? Is there some hidden agenda here? Is there some master scheme that's unfolding? Are we somehow being duped into waving these flags and everything like that?
Duped?
Or is this? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Is there anything to be afraid of here that I'm missing?
There's no political or governmental organization in this country that could get millions of people to rise up in tens of thousands of cities around the country within a given 18-month period to come out and protest. Nobody could organize that and motivate that. It's simultaneous. And what we are seeing is a ruling political elite that does not listen to the people. They are governing against the will of the people, and we've had it. And they're going to get their comeuppance.
All right, my guest this evening has been Bob McAfee. How can they get in touch with you? Do they go to what, like rightprinciples.com?
Rightprinciples.com, Bob Mack at rightprinciples.com.
Bob,
do you have a card?
Please.
I sure do.
We will, go on. Just Google this guy. Put it in YouTube. You'll see some pretty incredible stuff. And this Tea Party movement is not to be trifled with. Just ask Scott Brown. Just ask the guy in Kentucky, Alaska, Delaware, New Jersey, Virginia. The list goes on and on. Basically, Scott Brown, right now, Barney Frank in Massachusetts is in the fight of his life. And a lot has to do with the sentiment of limited government that is going on in the Tea Party movement. We want to close out. We have some footage of this Linda McMahon event that happened in East Hartford today. She got the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Businessmen. There was a room full of journalists that have spent their life doing journalism, which is a wonderful thing. Yours truly was there. I asked a question, and I guess I asked the wrong question because I should have kept with the script. No one gave me the handout before I went in, so I went in and I guess did something terribly wrong. Go ahead, Al. Well, let's roll the tape.
Definitely a piece of work down there today.
All of my life. My career has been creating jobs, growing a business, coming back from, at one time, bankruptcy, so I understand what it's like to risk it all and lose it all and come back. And I am hoping that in this race, not only for people like me, for myself, but other people like me, who will be coming forward to say, you know what, we want to make sure that we're going to preserve the American dream for the generations to come. So I am grateful this morning for the endorsement that Andy has given me from the NFIB. And as he said, it is significant. And when I'm out talking to the people in our state, small businesses, like the ones who are represented this morning, the questions are the same. How are we going to get government's hands out of our pockets so that we can
let's go right to the last
grow and create jobs and move our economy forward? So that's going to be our goal in the Senate and in Congress. And we have to move forward to get this country back on track, because until we put people back to work in the private sector, we will not have an economy that is going to recover and have a sustained recovery. So I thank you all for being here this morning. I thank you very much for your endorsement and your support, and I will look forward to seeing you as I continue going around the state to different events and shaking hands and meeting all of the people of our state like you and talking to you about your business. So thank you very much.
Your opponent, Connecticut's been called the most business-unfriendly state in the Union. It was actually determined that. Do you think your opponent has had a hand in creating a negative business climate in Connecticut?
That's what I'm told by businesses that I've talked to around Connecticut, that yes, there has been an involvement there. And when you have the head of UTC, his comment about growth is anywhere but Connecticut, I think we definitely have something wrong here.
Linda, do you endorse the NFIB's legislative agenda, which includes opposition to any further increases in federal minimum wage, relaxation of certain requirements under the Consumer Disabilities Act? How do you feel about things like that? Are you on board?
Well, I think what we have to look at whenever we're talking about minimum wage increases is where is our economy at this particular point, and how is that going to impact the businesses that are going to have to pay those wages. And I think that's part of what I bring to the table is understanding the consequences that affect the business by putting mandatory increases in place. It's the fellow who's running the retail store.
So that was the news conference earlier today, and it was interesting because I was personally identified quite a bit with the small businessman who was there, who said he started a cleaning business 20 years ago when he was a student at University of Connecticut, and all he was asking from the government, all he was asking was just leave me alone. I think of that flag. What's that yellow flag? What's it
Gadsden
called?
flag.
The Gadsden flag. It has a snake on it, and the caption is "Don't tread on me." And that was the voice of liberty that was first proclaimed by the founders of this country. And that's all they were saying to Britain was just leave us the heck alone. Don't overburden us with taxes. Don't try to regulate us. The idea is if there's a snake, don't go treading on it because it'll bite. And that seems to be the flag that is rallying some of these Tea Party organizations. They're saying, don't tread on me. And that was echoed this morning by that business owner, small business owner, a cleaning service. I was literally standing next to a pile of toilet brushes. This guy is in the business to clean, and some of the questions that were asked, that I asked, apparently were not, hardball enough. This was a reaction of some of the newscasters that were there. They were none too happy to have yours truly at the party. Okay. Well, this is our first taste of a real live news conference. I felt a little bit like the skunk at the garden party asking questions that might in some way endorse Linda McMahon. My take on the press was they were decidedly liberal and not in any way in favor of this campaign whatsoever. Gotcha journalism was at its best. A vague question about a 1941 thing. No, I'm Marty Heiser.
Come to our next Blumenthal press conference.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
What is it? What is it?
Come to the next Blumenthal press conference.
Oh, you guys
see how happy.
See how a little defensive about all this. My goodness.
We're doing our jobs.
Public access.
Public access, yeah. You seem a little defensive about it.
You can tune in tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, Comcast.
It's a bit antagonistic. It's surprising.
That's what it is. It's an adversarial
I guess we're looking for fair and balanced reporting. That's what we're
Come to the next Blumenthal one and see if
Yeah, no, I don't mind. Well, there you have it. The skunk at the garden party as our journalists leave this program. It's very interesting. One thing we do need is a bigger camera. Frankly, our camera is embarrassingly small. They have big cameras. We have a little camera. Now back to the studio.
Good Lord. Oh, my God.
Well, there you have it. Ideas are working below. We need bigger cameras. That was my experience at the news conference, and I will attend a Blumenthal news conference and see, because the journalists did challenge me there to say, and apparently they hold Blumenthal's feet to the fire too, which is good. Join us again next week. We're going to continue this. This is an exciting election season, and I really think there's some important issues in this country. Are we going to continue down this road, or are we looking for a correction? November 2nd, get out and vote, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.